Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to this special reception in honor of Mr. Don Meyer. My name is Sindra Stackhouse-Tate. I'm the Executive Director of the Wheaton College Alumni Association. I want to especially welcome Don's family, several of whom have traveled a distance to be here. Of course, Don's wife, Doris Meyer, class of '57, is here. Don and Doris's children, Jeff, Joelle, and Jill, and Don's grandson, Wheaton College Jr., Ben Meyer, are here. Oh, shout out for Ben. Don's brother Ken and his wife, Carol Meyer, are also with us today, and Don's niece, Karen Magnuson, and her daughter, Grace, are also here. Thank you for coming today. Welcome. I want to point out the cards on your tables where you can write a note to Don if you wish. We'll collect those and put them in a book to give to him after today's reception. For those of you who might not know what this award is all about, the Alumni Association Board of Directors has honored alumni every year since 1953 who have contributed 15 years or more of distinguished service to Wheaton College. The criteria for this award includes, among other things, nominees shall have exhibited excellence in their field of service. So today, we're thanking Don for his excellent service as a Wheaton College trustee for 23 years. Here's another one. Nominees shall have demonstrated spiritual impact on the college community. Don's spiritual influence has been deeply felt by his fellow trustees, by Wheaton presidents, vice presidents, and many others in the Wheaton community. Don has the spiritual gift of encouragement, and I have been personally encouraged by his kind notes and emails over the years. And here's my favorite on the list of criteria. The Alumni Board shall consider nominees who may have served quietly, faithfully, and with dedication. One of the best parts of my job is that I get to call or visit the Distinguished Service awardees and tell them about this honor. Well, when I called Don, there was a pause. Then he quietly chuckled and said, "Wow, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel this year, aren't you?" Then he seriously asked me to go back to the Alumni Board to take another look at the list because, in his words, surely there's someone more qualified than I to receive this award. I respectfully told him I had no intention of going back to the Alumni Board because after they learned about Don's quiet, faithful, generous service to Wheaton, they voted unanimously and enthusiastically that this year's Distinguished Service to Alma Mater Award should go to him. It's our privilege today to hear from two people who know Don well. Current chairman of the board of Wheaton's Board of Trustees, Dr. David Gieser, and Vice President for Advancement and Alumni Relations, Dr. Mark Dillon. After they speak, President Ryken and Alumni Board President Chris Johns will present the award to Don. We'll hear from our guest of honor, then we'll sing his favorite hymn, led by Dr. Tony Payne from our conservatory. And closing us in prayer today will be the man responsible for recruiting Don to come to Wheaton College nearly 60 years ago, Mr. Lee Fund. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Chairman of the Board, Dr. David Gieser.
Well, what a grand afternoon this is, and a time to just reflect and remember and honor a special friend. It's been my privilege to work with Don on the Board of Trustees for over 20 years. And when he was chairman of the board, I served as the secretary of the board. And then when he co-chaired the selection committee for determining the next president of Wheaton College, I was then serving on that committee as well. So I've gotten to know him up close and personal. And there's so many things that I appreciate about Don. Quiet, gentle, patient, yet strong and firm with regard to those foundational principles that count for living and for this institution. He has an unusual sense and appreciation for the importance of tradition, the past of an institution, but at the very same time has that ability to have a creative spirit, the willingness to explore something differently, to think afresh about how he might approach an opportunity. But the thing that is his core is what has meant the most to me. It's that profound, deep, steady faith in God and his love of the Lord Jesus. And I'll tell you a little story that might help you understand what I mean. For months, we had been meeting as a selection committee, working through the various candidates who might become then the president of the college. We started with over 100, and in due course, we whittled it down to 20, and then we got down to 12, and then we got down to 8, and somewhere in that range, on a Saturday, I still remember it well, I was feeling unsettled. The weight of it all, the significance of the decision, was just weighing me down. And that afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, I had to fix something on our roof. So I was up on our roof, and my cell phone rang. And there was Don Meyer on the other end of that cell phone call. And I just told him how I was feeling. And he said, "David, just keep taking steps, and God's clear provision will become evident." And I was standing on the roof. It was a beautiful day, clear, calm, crisp fall air, and the sun was just going down in the west and peeking through the branches of the trees, and I had just received some words of assurance and encouragement that I needed. And in the ensuing weeks, we continued to meet as a committee, and then one afternoon, within minutes, the selection committee for the next president of Wheaton College came together within just a short period of time, and we were certain God was leading us to call Philip Graham Ryken as the 8th president of Wheaton College. Don was right on with his word to me. God clearly provided for us. Don's ballast, that deep faith and commitment in his Lord. And Don, for many years and in many different situations, you've been at the helm of this institution. And we thank God for you. And we thank you for your distinguished service on behalf of your alma mater. Thank you, Don.
The Apostle Paul, in thanking the Corinthian church for their investment of time and resources in his ministry, said this: "For the rendering of this service not only supplies the wants of the saints, but it also overflows in many thanksgivings to God." I can hardly begin to tell you how much Don Meyer's involvement with the advancement work of the college has meant to me, the advancement team, and to the whole college, but I'm going to try. What Don, along with his wife Doris, have done for Wheaton College is significant, but I want to focus my remarks on what I and the advancement team and Wheaton College have learned from Don Meyer. I want to start by saying that Don is the most effortlessly generous and unself-conscious giver I've ever known, and I've met a lot of generous people. I see it in the quiet way he gives to Wheaton. I think I can tell this story now. He's trustee emeritus, so I can get in less trouble, at least, for telling you this story. My very first trustee retreat was about 17 years ago. Ken, that was 17 years ago. And it was in June. The end of our fiscal year is June, and during that time, Don just quietly handed me a check, and that amount put us over our annual fund goal for that year. And I just mentioned to the trustees when they asked me in one of the meetings, I said, well, from a check that we received, I certainly didn't identify the giver, but a check we received just right here, we've made our goal. Back at the office the next week, I got a call from Don Meyer. And he said, "Mark, I just want you to know, I want to be real careful about who knows about my giving to Wheaton College." He said, I do not want my giving to affect my standing on the board of trustees. He didn't want that to influence his influence on the board. It says a lot about him. I see his generosity in how he treats people. On more occasions than I can count, he has invited people to get together, always on his own tab, so that they can more deeply understand the influence of Wheaton. I see the quiet, generous tip to a bellman who rendered a small favor. When he calls me, although he knows my direct line, he always calls Anna's line and always engages her in caring conversation before we talk. In the dozens of Wheaton gatherings where he has spoken eloquently about his journey of stewardship, I've seen his kindness to our team, Bonnie, Kim, Genesis, and our regional directors. Here are just some of the things I've learned from my friendship with Don. First, generosity is a gift, but also a discipline. I've already described Don as a gifted giver, but he is the first to say that generosity does not come naturally. He works at it. He gives often and generously to many causes. The habit of giving begets more giving, but he puts himself in situations where fellow believers share their journeys of generosity. He's never satisfied with being more generous than most. He cultivates a life of placing his treasure in things that will last for eternity. I've learned that it is important to be an interesting person. Probably the single greatest lesson Don has taught me about the work that I do is his encouragement to be an interesting person. His counsel to his sales teams and to us who are involved in funding the ministry of Wheaton is don't be an order taker. Add value to the people you interact with. Know them, care for them, be alert to spiritual needs. Enrich their lives by being a person who is growing in knowledge and wisdom and spiritual insight. That is a standard that we attempt to rise to in our advancement work. I've also learned from Don how important it is to be a trusted person. Don has taught us this not by his words, but by how he conducts his life. Integrity is not a motto or a talking point for Don. It is the direct result of being a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ. With Don, a confidential conversation remains so. Every commitment is followed through on. What he says he will do, he does. I have learned how winsome and important it is to be a trusted person. And finally, I've learned how important it is to be a kingdom person. For all of Don's love and care for Wheaton College, he is decidedly kingdom-focused in the giving of his time and resources. As we planned and moved through our most recent campaign, Don emphasized over and over again, this is not about how much money we can get for Wheaton College. It is about challenging men and women we come in contact with to be rich toward God with their resources, whether or not Wheaton benefits directly. I love that. It's what should mark giving and gathering of resources in Christ's kingdom. You are just as likely to find Don rehabbing houses for the poor in Buffalo as speaking to a group of Wheaton donors. That is what you would expect from a citizen of Christ's kingdom. Don, thank you for being a generous, interesting, trusted, and kingdom person. Your involvement with us, whether you know it or not, has resulted in countless expressions of thanksgiving to God all over this campus. And because of all that you and Doris and your family have invested in us, many future generations of Wheaton students and staff and faculty, knowingly or not, will thank God for you. Don, when I grow up, I want to be a lot like you.
Well, I believe that those who give the most have the most joy. And if you've had an opportunity to have a personal relationship with Don Meyer, you've seen a living illustration of that principle. It's a special privilege for me to participate, even in a small way, in this presentation, for many reasons, partly because of the things that I learned from Don during my time on the Board of Trustees, but especially because of the very important, meaningful, for me, life-changing conversations we had over the course of the presidential selection process. There's a deep bond that comes from wrestling together over God's calling and seeking to discern that, and I know Tom Pratt understands what I'm talking about as well in a special way. I remember a few years ago, we had an evening where we, instead of having a dinner for the trustees on campus, we had dispersed into the greater Wheaton community for evenings when faculty members and members of the Board of Trustees met together for dinner and for conversation about the Christian life and about Wheaton College and about all kinds of other things. My parents were privileged to spend the evening with Don Meyer because he was the trustee in the faculty home where they had enjoyed dinner. And my parents came back refreshed, I would say even excited about what it means to be a steward of God's gifts. And as my parents came into the home, they were talking about the way that Don had showed them what it meant to him to have your life and your gifts and your treasure as something you receive from God and then share in a generous way with others. You've heard a few testimonies already this afternoon of the way that kind of generous giving refreshes others and encourages others to use their time, their talent, their treasure for kingdom purposes. I want to invite Don Meyer to come forward now for the presentation, and Chris Johns is here as the president of our Alumni Association Board to make that presentation.
It is my great privilege to be able to present this award on behalf of the Wheaton College Alumni Association. And we're going to be giving this plaque, a citation to Don Meyer this afternoon, and I'd like to read it for you so you know what it says. The Wheaton College Alumni Association, Alumnus of the Year for distinguished service to Alma Mater, given to Donald L. Meyer, class of '57. For your unwavering commitment to the mission of Wheaton College, and for your many years of dedicated service, open generosity, and spirit-led leadership, the Wheaton College Alumni Association is pleased to honor you with this award. And then we have beneath that Don's favorite verses in the Bible from Romans chapter 12, familiar verses 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Romans 12, 1 and 2. So it's my pleasure to give this award to him. Would you congratulate him together? Congratulations, sir. Awesome, sir. I'll take this over. You want to hold
on. Wow. Thank you so much for that award. I was shocked when Cinder called me and said that this was a possibility, but I'm really grateful for this school for what it's done for me. And I'll mention a few of those things as we go on. But first of all, I just want to say something about Dave. We've had a great relationship as Dave has been with us on the board. And now to have him as the board chair. One thing about Dave is this board will not be stagnant. This board will not just come and show up for a few meetings and then go home. This is going to be a growing board, and I can see it already. Lunch periods are now an hour and a half, and there's somebody brought in to challenge the minds of these board members. And Dave and I have had a great time together over 20 years. We had a wonderful time on the Presidential Search Committee. Dave, how many years were you the chairman, Dave, of Student Affairs? 18. Maybe 18. In fact, you know, it's kind of hard for me to understand why the board would have to have a committee for student affairs. Can you imagine that? Anyway, what Dave did was not only knew what was going on, the pulse of the school, but he did exit interviews. And he talked to juniors and seniors and said, what's going on? What's happening in your lives? And brought that back to the board to help us make decisions on the future of the school. Thank you so much, Dave. And let me just say a word about Mark. We've been together doing this for a long time. In the presidential capital campaign we just went through, the POW, as we called it, Promise of Wheaton, we started back about 7 years ago and met at hotels around the country with Wheaton donors. And we would spend from Friday evening through Saturday, even into Sunday morning, meeting with 18, 20 people, couples, singles, and just talk about what it means to be godly givers. And Mark is exactly right. This was certainly a pitch for Wheaton College. We certainly wanted them to give to Wheaton College. We wanted to raise $260 million for enhancements at Wheaton College. But we went into that campaign saying that if we come out of that campaign and Wheaton gets zero, hopefully we'll have done something to challenge each person we've been with to be more generous and be willing to open up their hands with the things that they had, the treasures they've had and have, and give them to God's kingdom. So Mark and I have had a great time together. I was the chairman of the advancement committee for many years, working with Mark. And if you think about this, in Mark's tenure here, we've had a chapel expansion, we've redone the Adams Hall, the Student Memorial Center has been redone, new buildings, sports and recreation, the Beamer Center, the Wade Center, Science Center, probably some that I haven't even thought about. But there's been a reconfiguration of this campus since Mark has been here with his advancement team. And at some point, it will be wonderful for you to meet the people on his advancement team. They're all exceptionally bright, and they're hardworking. And thank you, Mark, for your kind words. It was 2 weeks ago, Doris, myself, and our family, we were sitting in the living room of my daughter's house, and our 17-year-old granddaughter, in all of the conversation said, well, okay now, you 6 Wheaties that are sitting here, what do you remember as the most important thing when you went to Wheaton College? What did you get out of Wheaton College? And there were a number of responses, but 3 that I remembered clearly. First, everyone said it was a first-class education, that what we learned at Wheaton, the training, was second to none. Secondly, we said there are lifelong relationships that we have now. They just go on and on and on, and they started at Wheaton. And third, we talked about godly mentors, people who influenced us, as we heard in chapel this morning, a professor who so influenced the speaker. And he talked about it several times, and so we talked about godly mentors. First, the first-class education. You know, when you come out of school, you really don't know how you measure up. We're kind of here. But when you go into the business world, as I was privileged to do, and rub shoulders with men and women from other schools, you very quickly learn that you've been taught to think well, and you've been taught to reason, and you've had professors who are exceptional and who have taken interest in you. So there's no question, we have had a first-class education. And then in the lifelong relationships, this was really brought to mind again for me about 3 weeks ago. We're trying to build here at Wheaton College a new baseball field. And in that process, I sent out a letter to about 20 ex-baseball players during my era of the 50s and early 60s, explaining what the project was, seeing if they'd be willing to donate something to it. And about a week later, I had a phone call that ended up on my voicemail, and it was from Ron Pott. Ron Pott was a baseball and a soccer player here, graduated in '59, and I was able to be privileged to catch for Ron for 2 years. He's a big, strong, tall, right-handed guy, a pretty good pitcher. Ron said, I got your letter, and on the bottom of the letter, I had scratched and said, Ron, could you still throw a few innings? And he, in this little voicemail, he said, you know, I can't probably throw 2 innings, but I can probably throw 2 innings to my black lab. I can probably still do that. Yeah. You know, we sat there, and we talked for 20 minutes. Haven't seen Ron in over 50 years. And we talked about baseball. We talked about Coach Fund. We talked about our son-in-laws, who were both here together as soccer players. And we just kind of went down a list, and I got done with that conversation and said, you know, we haven't skipped a beat. We talked about how God's been faithful to us, to our families, the spiritual heritage that we have because of this school. And so it's a lifelong relationship, and Ron is just an example of many that I've met over the years, be apart for 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, and you come back together because of the influence, the godly influence of this school. And then we talked about godly mentors, and let me just tell you about my mentors here, 2 people in particular. Coach Lee Fund is here with us. When I got out of school in Chicago at Taft High School, the last thing I wanted to do was to go to Wheaton College or any college. I simply wanted to get a job, make some money, buy a nice car, and that would be my vision for life. But one night I got a call from Coach Fund. I had heard his name about him, but I really had never talked to him. And he asked me if I was interested in going to college, and I said, you know, not really. That's not where I'm going to go. And I said, well, how did you get my name? And he said, well, I was talking to your baseball coach in Chicago and asked him, are there any kids around that you would recommend for Wheaton College? And so Jim Smilgoff, the coach, said, well, there's one kid. I don't know if he's going to go to school or not, but he's a fairly good baseball player. And then he added on, he said, he may fit for you, Lee, because he's kind of one of those religious types. And so Lee told me about Wheaton. And I said, Lee, I'll think about it a little bit, and I'll call you back. And did, and said, you know, I would be interested. But the problem is, my grades were not spectacular in high school. So I doubt that I could make it in. Lee called me back a week later, and he said, here's what we'll do, if you're willing to do it. You come out here in the spring, 1953, take 8 hours, make sure you have a C or better average, and we'll admit you in the fall of 1953. As I thought about that, that was working perfectly because Doris, my wife, was entering Wheaton College in the fall of '53. So I did that, spent that spring coming out to Wheaton College, driving back and forth from Chicago, and entered in '53. And my 4 years here, with the influence of Coach Fund, were some of the best years of my life. I can think of the trips we made to Florida, and at that time we drove in 3 or 4 cars, and so we'd have long, long hours sitting together, laughing, talking, listening to some adult men who were driving those cars for us. I'll never forget, we were at a church, I think in Florida, Louisiana, one of those places, and Lee had asked a few of us to give a short devotional. And so I got up for about a 5-minute devotional and talked about 1 Corinthians 9, where Paul talks about being all things to all men. You have no idea what I said about that. But a little while later, Lee came up to me and said, you know, Don, you do that pretty well. You should do more of it. And I realized at that moment the power of an affirmation from a person who you look up to. It was so strong, and it encouraged me to continue speaking wherever I had an opportunity. Lee taught us to play hard, to play fair, and to represent Christ well. Thank you, Coach. And then another godly mentor at Wheaton, who I don't think is here today, but I wish he was Dr. William Volkmann. Doc Volkmann was in the business department. He taught us taxes, corporate finance, advanced accounting. And he was a young person, probably about 30 years old, had a degree in law and was a CPA, taught us the books, what was in the books, but was able to tell us stories that illustrated the very things we were learning in those books. And everybody wanted to be in Doc Volkmann's class. In addition to just helping us learn what we were supposed to learn, he continually challenged us to be something special. He continually talked to us about the potential we had to affect the kingdom of God. He'd say things like, why can't you own your company? Why can't you be the best CEO? How much influence can you have as an attorney working whatever field, part of the law field that you would work in? And so over the years, actually, Doc Volkmann would take, I think about a 10-year period, carloads of kids who wanted to go to law school, and he'd drive them all through the East, the Ivy League schools, and let them see the schools. And I probably, Wheaton, in that period of time, had more men and women go into law schools and come out than probably any time in its history. It was because of Doc Volkmann. Well, I left Wheaton, and in 1957 went to work for a small lumber company called Bailey Lumber. There were 4 people there. I was the 5th one. And after 6 years was able to buy this business. It certainly was not a big deal, but for me, for us at that time, it was a very big deal. And before I did that, I came back and spent a day with Doc Volkmann. Just hung out in his class, had lunch with him, showed him all the numbers, and said, what do you think? And his encouragement was this: Don, don't fear risk. And I've never forgotten it, because it's so easy to be cautious to the point where you can never move forward. And Doc said to me, I know you well enough. I think you have the right gifts to succeed at Bailey. And then he said, think of what you can give to the kingdom if your business is successful. Coach Fund and Doc Volkmann had a vision for me beyond what I could have for myself. Coach Fund and Doc Volkmann enlarged my mind way beyond what I could have done by myself. Coach Fund encouraged me to come to Wheaton College, and Dr. Volkmann helped me believe I could excel beyond Wheaton. So today, I'm thankful for the education at Wheaton. My wife was here. We've had 3 children here, as you've heard. Grandson Ben is here now. I'm so grateful for the lifelong relationships, the Ron Potts, that I meet all around this country as we get together with different Wheaton folks. And then for the godly mentors, the Coach Funds and the Doc Volkmanns, who are willing to give their time and effort and love us so that we were well prepared, not just in our field, but well prepared to love God with all of our hearts. My prayer today is that the students of Wheaton College will have those mentors like Doc Volkmann and Coach Fund who continually challenge them, and then they'll experience the lifelong relationships that are so vital. Today you've recognized me with an award for service to Wheaton College. However, in my view, this award belongs to all the godly mentors who cared for me and countless others, while we were at Wheaton. They do it year after year after year, day after day. They invest their lives in young men and women who walk out of these doors prepared with a great education, but with the spirit that says, I want to serve Christ wherever I happen to be. It's these men and women who deserve recognition for outstanding service day after day, week after week, year after year. I thank you for this award.
Now I can't see you, Don, but I know you're there. It's such an honor to be in your company, and these words of commendation and testimony give us all an example, and I'm reminded of these words out of 2 Corinthians. You yourself are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everybody. And today, you are our letter. Let's just in this quiet moment, before we sing Don's favorite hymn, just give this moment to the Lord. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you, oh my soul, rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Will you stand and sing? And
I could say a lot about the young man that stood before us today. I know that he touched all the bases, and he became captain of the team, and it was a happy experience, and he's told you some of that. Let's bow together. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. Bless the Lord, all his works, in all places of his dominion. Bless the Lord, O my soul. So be it. Amen.
How great is it having Lee Fund here? Thank you, Lee. We're going to take a couple of photos of Don and his family. If you haven't had a chance to greet him, I'm sure he'd be happy to see you. We're going to take a couple of shots. Thank you all for coming. Have a good day.